So I want to then turn to a different part of the ICT sector because we are looking at the whole range. And there is increasing convergence in this sector around manufacture and services. So we had an apology from our earlier panelist who was not able to join us because of visa issues, but we're very pleased to have Laura Seresna from Cividep. She's the policy advisor and is working on the manufacturing dimension. Cividep works on garment, electronics, and plantations, as I understand, and looks at the human rights of workers in this context. So I turn it over to you, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as you've rightly said, we are a human rights organization based in Bangalore, the Silicon Valley of India, and we have worked for 10 years on labor rights and corporate accountability in the garment manufacturing sector in Bangalore, and have 5 years ago also turned our eye on the electronics manufacturing sector, that is the mobile phone manufacturing, around Chennai in South India. Is there a need for more corporate accountability in relation to business in the ICT sector? Yes, there definitely is. The electronics sector is the fastest growing manufacturing sector in the world right now. So what are the kind of risks or adverse impacts that companies should look at as required under the OECD guidelines and also the UN guiding principles on business and human rights? In electronic manufacturing, we have risks in the field of occupational health and safety. We have a lot of hazardous substances and chemicals that workers have to deal with on a daily basis that they are often not aware of what the effects can be. We have observed cancer clusters in semiconductor manufacturing in South Korea. Another risk is in the field of an increased use of temporary labor and contract labor. The electronics manufacturing sector is an extremely fast-paced and an extremely flexible sector, and when we talk to component manufacturers, I always hear from them that yes, we have to be flexible, and therefore our labor force needs to be flexible, and therefore we need to have more than half of our labor force actually outsourced through manpower agencies to be sort of hire and retrench them on a basis of how they are required for the manufacturing process. We think this is very critical. I mean, this is very difficult because these workers do not fall under the principal workforce of the company. They are outsourced and their labor rights are often severely restricted. Then the third field that I would like to bring on the table is the lack of representation of workers, the lack of freedom of association on the factory floors, and the lack of functional operational level grievance mechanism on the factory floors. There are, of course, also environmental risks with shorter lifespans of our electronic products. We have an increase in electronic waste, e-waste, and of course there are a lot of occupational health and safety risks and also environmental risks that are related to e-waste. What's the role of the NCPs in offering mediation and clarifying the nature of corporate social responsibility? Well, I think the NCPs under the OECD guidelines are very unique. They are a very unique mechanism. And this is what really sets the guidelines apart from the UN guiding principles, in that the guidelines offer a grievance redressal mechanism. And in that sense, we appreciate the NCPs, and we can think that they can complement or that they can even fill gaps and address grievances. But they're in no way a substitute for effective operational or company-level grievance mechanisms. The basic would be on an operational level, at the factory level is, I think, the most important grievance mechanism is a functioning trade union, because once workers are represented, they can directly resolve their issues with the management through trade union representatives. Another thing that companies need to look at is the compliance to local laws, even in countries where the enforcement of the law might be weak. If they do that, then that will significantly reduce their risk to breach human rights and increase their due diligence. One more thing that I would like to raise is that electronics manufacturing in India happens a lot in what we call special economic zones, or export processing zones, where companies are not only exempted from tax payments, but they also enjoy what they call flexible labor laws. I have a severe problem with flexible labor laws because I think laws are there to be followed or to be complied with, and there's a risk in that we sort of water them down or make them more flexible. There's a risk, there's a serious risk for companies to violate rights. How many cases can NCPs expect to receive in future? Well, and how can they prepare for this? I think with what I said in the beginning, it's the fastest growing sector, manufacturing sector in the world, and I think NCPs can expect a lot of more cases in the ICT sector, and Privacy International's case will most definitely not be the only one. I think there are a lot to follow, and therefore it's absolutely essential that NCPs handle cases in a timely manner, stick to their timelines, ensure functional equivalence, be impartial to both parties. And in order to do so, we think it's necessary that they, if they haven't done so already, that they restructure and that they set up advisory committees or oversight bodies that can advise them and monitor the process. They have to be equitable. They have to also take into account power imbalances. I think we had the panel yesterday evening where we talked a lot about mediation, and I had the feeling that the general notion is that in a mediation process, there are two parties who come together with the same background, with the same access to information, with the same financial resources, and that's just not the case if we look at the manufacturing sector, but also at the extractive sector, where we deal with companies on the one hand and workers on the other, or communities on the other hand. And I think it's important for NCPs to see these power imbalances and to sort of even them out or balance them out by allowing the party who is in a disadvantaged position to bring in their own advisors, to give them time, to give them access to information. In either way, NCPs can issue final statements, whether a mediation process was successful or not. They can issue final statements, and we would encourage them to do so in any case, with statements with recommendations to the company. And even if a company or also the other side, the workers or the communities, are not willing to mediate, I think final statements can be a good guidance for other companies in the sector, and sort of show them what is expected, what kind of conduct is expected from them. And last but not least, we from OECD Watch, we would always encourage NCPs, or we have encouraged NCPs also this week, to ensure follow-up and monitoring of agreements that are reached in the mediation process, because only then you can really see what the actual outcome is.